Hello everybody, I am Laura Rogers and welcome to my session. This one is all about using Adobe Sign and integrated with SharePoint and different things you can do with Microsoft Flow and just kind of what Adobe Sign is, what you can do with SharePoint and what you can do to kind of integrate the things together. And this is now, if you want to do it from scratch and do it all by hand and do it not having to pay for a third-party product, then the thing that Nick described about doing signatures in the session before me is that's exactly what you do. But Adobe Sign is just it is not free. It is a third-party product. So this session is all about Adobe Sign. So if you have any questions about not having to use Adobe Sign and doing signatures, all you have to do is watch Nick's session. So just have to rewind it. All right, I cannot wait. Next year we will all be in Vegas, March 23rd through 25th at what used to be called the SharePoint Conference is now Microsoft 365 Collaboration Conference. And we have, let's see, some lovely sponsors. Check these guys out. Thank you to our sponsors. A little bit about me. I live in Birmingham, Alabama. Nick, who is on here right before me, he's my neighbor, sort of. He's here in Birmingham as well. I have my own training company, IW Mentor, SharePoint, Power Apps, Power Automate training. And my favorite thing is business processes, forms. Through the years, I used to love InfoPath and SharePoint Designer workflows, and I've evolved, with all the different technologies. And so I usually use Power Apps and Flow for most of the things I do these days, but this Adobe Sign thing is really powerful and really cool, and I thought I'd share it with you and share what it can do if you wanted to go that direction instead of using Power Apps, sort of. We'll talk about the different scenarios and things that it's good for and things that it's not good for. There is also a raffle for an Oculus Quest. Mine is I ordered one. It's supposed to be in this week. I cannot wait. It's going to be so much fun. And also think about donating to one of these awesome charities here. Okay, so let's talk about my agenda for this session. We'll do an introduction to Adobe Sign. We'll talk about some scenarios, examples of why you would use it, and things that I've done with my customers where they use it. We'll talk about the concepts to understand in that interface. And then we'll start talking about it with flow, triggers and actions, and then completely separate from what you could do with Flow, there is SharePoint site integration that you can turn on with Adobe eSign too, where you can just click on a file in a library and send it to be eSigned. So hopefully we'll have enough time at the end to cover a little bit of that. All right, first an introduction to Adobe Sign. It used to be called eSign, now it's just Adobe Sign. The enterprise version of this product can integrate with your Office 365 credentials. I know there are several levels of licensing you can get, but it's the enterprise version that you can kind of tie into your Office 365 accounts. It is not free, but if you'd like to try it out, you can create a developer account using this link. The one that I'm using for this demo is a developer account. So it's got these big red letters and like the word test is in front of everything. It's because it's a developer account. And I use the real product version in some of my customers in the flows and things in those projects that I do for them. But just for my own personal, just for trying things out, I have a developer account. All right, documents, PDFs, different types of files can be digitally signed. That is what it's all about. You can send a file through multiple levels of approval. You can even use templates for common types of agreements and forms that you have in your company. And files can be sent to anyone with an email address. So anyone at all. It doesn't have to be somebody inside of your company. Anybody can e-sign. And it has built-in notifications. Emails go out when it's time to sign something. Emails go out when things are finished being signed. You can even have additional options for reminders and due dates and extra things like that. It's really easy, just built in. And of course, it also integrates with SharePoint and Power Automate. I've tried a couple of the other products. I've tried DocuSign with its integration in Flow, and it is crap compared to what Adobe has. Adobe is awesome, and I don't know anybody at Adobe. Adobe cares less if I'm promoting their product, but just from me testing it and trying it out, I think this one, they've really gone far in all the integration and things they've built in with what it can do with these Microsoft products. All right, so first of all, when someone, just as a quick, what it looks like for the end user, when someone gets a file to eSign, they just have this easy little button that says click here to sign. You all have probably received one of these at some point in your life where you just get someone wants you to eSign something. You can type your name, you can draw it if you want. It really just needs your name and some sort of signature. The little mobile thing is interesting because if you click that, you type your phone number, and then it sends you a text with a link to click, and then you draw your signature on the phone. So I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, as opposed to maybe if you're on the phone when you're reading your emails and clicking on this, that's easier, because you could just click the draw button and draw it there. All right. Okay, so let's do a demo of Adobe Sign. So again, this is my little test account, and of course I've got to reload the whole thing because it times out. I'm using my test account called Allie B, so everything says Allie in here. And I tied this into the Office 365 credentials. So notice when I tab over to the password, it's basically it's using my Office 365 credentials. So users wouldn't have a different password. And when it comes to Adobe eSign accounts, this enterprise account, I have one customer that just purchased a single enterprise account, and we just use that one. It's got for the mailbox, for the email address, we just use a shared mailbox. And that is the one account we use when we're running all the flows to authenticate. And they didn't purchase it for any of the other users in their company. So that one account just runs all the flows. And but then the other option is if you want all the people in your company to be able to go to this interface and click to send things to be e-signed, this is what that interface looks like. And depending on levels of permissions you give them, they'll have different things. Like not everybody's going to have the ability to create and share templates with the whole company, and not everybody, it's got kind of levels of permissions, kind of like SharePoint. So this is what the main interface looks like. So before we start talking about SharePoint, we'll just talk about what it looks like to just start the process of requesting a signature. So it starts off with, who do you want to send this to? And I'll just send this to my Yahoo account. And so you can add multiple people here. It's got a lot of different options and things like that for how you can send it to people. We don't really have the bandwidth in this session to get too nitty-gritty into all the little possible things that you could click on, but I'm just going to take this, I've got this PDF file just on my desktop that it just says this is a test. It's just the most plain thing I can think of, just to show a quick example. So I take this PDF file and I just drag it over here, and then see now it says, okay, so what does your message want to say? Change my message. By default, it will just be the name of the file. And then I have some other options I can do, like password protect it, send them a reminder after a certain date. I don't have to click preview and add signature fields. I could just send it. If I just send it, it will just stick a signature just at the bottom of whatever the file is. It will just find the bottom of the file and insert it there. But I can preview it and add signature fields, and I could, this gives me more of a granular control of where the signature is going to be. So I can say I'll just put a signature block like that. So, and we'll talk in a little bit, we'll talk about all these cool things over here like data fields. That part is, that's the really fun part. So I just said this is a test, and I'm just gonna hit send. All right, so now, of course, this is one of those demo accounts. So it's got demo use only and these big red things all over everything. So it doesn't want you to try and use it for real world stuff. All right, so then I sent that to my Yahoo account. So then the person that you sent it to gets, let me see if I can pop this email out. My Yahoo account. The person, I've got my company logo in here. and I've got, see, it says review and sign. This is a test, and it tells me who it's from. Like I've got like 200,000 unread messages in my Yahoo account that I never look at. Okay, so then the interface that they're presented with, the signer can click here to sign, and I can draw, but it still needs to know my name. All right, so there's my lovely digital signature. I put this thing called a signature block. It puts the signature there with my name and the date, and I just click to sign. All right, and then the person who is sending and receiving digital signatures in their Adobe Sign account. So this is letting the person, the external person, know that they're finished signing it. And then now I'm back to my Ally account, and she can actually go to, let's see, I'll go manage, and I'll go look at my files in progress. So these are files that I've sent out that are waiting for people to sign. And these are files, like this is the one I just sent. And I can go click and look at them, download them. I've got audit reports and all kinds of fancy stuff. And so this shows a whole history of the ones that I've sent. And I can tell that in my in progress, this one has 2 signers. So only one out of the 2 signers finished doing what they're doing. So it's still waiting for the second one. So if you have more than 1 signers, that's how we'll let you know. And then you can even manually go in here and send a reminder. Even if you didn't turn on reminders, you can manually do that. A lot of really powerful stuff in this interface. So that's what you can, that's just really basic of what you can do just in the Adobe eSign interface. So now let's go back to the slides, and now that we kind of level set of what it looks like and basic functionality, we'll go into some examples. All right, so I want to think about all just big, long, like legal agreements and really long forms that have pages and pages of text and maybe some fillable fields here and there, but they're just really, really long and cumbersome forms. Think about those, and I'm sure you've seen those. You might have those around your company. You can send those out for signature outside of the company. So you can even, using the cool flow integration we'll talk about, you can even have some metadata in it, and you can have some of the metadata pre-filled. And so it will just send them, okay, here's all your information. This is a form. It's got some information pre-filled for you. All you have to do is sign it. Like, this is how much money you're going to give me. Sign here. And then another thing is, got a couple of customers that are in education, and they use this. Their students need to sign things. Students and their parents need to sign forms. So you can easily just send things to external people, just agreements that you need them to sign, and you just need to collect those as PDFs and just have those turned in. Another cool thing that Adobe eSign has that's really awesome is a web form. What? Yes. So external users, anyone, can fill out a web form and sign it. And what it does is, so they type in who they are and their email address when they're digitally signing this form, but it always verifies who they are. So as soon as I fill in a web form and type what my email address is, it's going to send an email to me and say, okay, you just signed this web form and said this is you, click to verify. So it's, again, it's always verifying that the person signing it is who they say they are. And then it's got, you can create common templates for employees to pick from and fill out. So think about just maybe company policies that people have to sign all the time, just big long agreements, NDAs maybe that people have to sign. You have this interface in there. Right when you click to start sending an agreement, you can pick from existing templates. It's like a library of templates that you have created for your company. You can create them for certain groups of people, and it's even got some built-in ones like W-9s. And this can also integrate directly into SharePoint sites. All right, so let's talk about some concepts to understand. Okay, files can be sent to more than one recipients for signature. You can even determine a certain order that it goes in and roles of different people. Like it's got this little drop-down box over here. You have people that are, you have things like signer and delegation and just kind of various things. We're only going to talk about signer just in this session though. This is one of those topics that you could go pretty deep in and spend like an entire day learning about Adobe Sign. You can also turn on deadlines, reminders, and even password protect the file. You can manage and track all of your sent and received files on that site. Now you'll see this terminology when you start dealing with the flow actions, agreements. You'll see the term document, you'll see the term agreement. An agreement is what they consider the thing that you send to the person to sign. So there is a way that you could send, you could have multiple templates put together. Like when I uploaded that test file, when I was sending an agreement to somebody, you could have multiple files that you send to somebody at once. That whole thing, that one thing you're sending them is considered an agreement by Adobe. So it could be one file, but it could be more. It's just being sent to them in one email, and it looks like one big long thing to sign when they're presented with it for their signature. Let's see. Okay, they have a concept of templates. These are common files that people in your organization send for signature. They can be uploaded. You just drag the Word doc, PDF, whatever it is, onto that interface in Adobe Sign, and there are a few built in. Templates can have defined fillable fields, and it starts by someone picking a template from a drop-down box and picking an email address to send it to. So that's how that is triggered by someone just out of the box without SharePoint being involved, is someone goes to the Adobe Sign interface and clicks to send something and picks to send from that library of templates. You also have web forms. So web forms would be the concept of having to get a bunch of metadata from someone and being able to send this to somebody outside of the company. This is always going to have a signature. So you can't just do some fields and no signature. It's going to be required to have a signature. And it is always going to send an email to that person who fills it out to verify their email address when they send one in, when they submit it. And this is also, you start creating this by uploading a document or PDF. So the creation experience for a template and a web form is exactly the same. The interface is exactly the same. But the thing about web forms is you're going to be given a URL. So then once the web form's created, you have a URL. You could put your URL on your SharePoint site. You could send your URL to external customers, whatever you want to do with that URL, but that's where someone starts to start filling out a web form, which is different than a template where somebody in your company who has an Adobe eSign account has to pick which template they want and pick who to send it to start that process. Does that make sense? No questions? Let's see. Yes, it is cloud-based. It is not a software to install. All right. Starts with it uploading a file, just like you saw me drag that test file onto my screen. And then, so before you start uploading your file, whether you pick to do a web form or do a template, they're both going to start by uploading a file, and the interface for designing that form is going to be exactly the same for both of those with that preview and add fields format. So this is what it looks like. So I took just a generic statement of work and I uploaded it. And so what you do is you have all these data fields. So look over on the right, I have signature info, which is like my signature block and the name of the person signing it, the date they're signing it, but I also have just free-form data fields like text fields, drop downs, check boxes, just different types like that. And I just drag them onto this surface. So here's one that I dragged onto the screen called total hours. And I clicked on it, and when this is the little screen you get when you go to the properties. So I just renamed it and called it hours. And then you can say which, if you have multiple signers for that particular thing, whatever it is, you can say which signer is supposed to fill out that particular field. And then you can say what type it is, and even you can do a whole bunch of extra settings, things you might be used to when dealing with just other products and other form products, like having required fields, read only. You can do validation. You even have some little conditional rules you can do. One of the negatives to this concept is that it's just this thing behind the scenes here is just, oops, that's just the file that I uploaded. And if you need to make changes to the file, you re-upload it and start all over. So I would get your document looking the way you want it to do, because it's not easy to just make simple tweaks to the file. So like maybe if I didn't leave enough space between these lines here in my Word doc and I didn't have room to put this text box, I would just go edit my Word doc and start all over. Now, you don't have to completely start all over. It's got sort of a little weird, awkward concept of you can have one of these that is a template with reusable fields, like a template of fields. And so I could have this statement of work for 2020 this year, and I can upload a new one next year and use this first one to like pull in all the fields from it. It's a concept. It makes sense and it works, but it's kind of hard to explain to people, and it's kind of a weird, awkward thing is when it comes to training. Like I'm handing this over to my customer and I'm saying, okay, all of your agreements are ready, but next year, if you want to change your agreements, you have to do this weird thing with re-uploading it and then picking this other thing and then pulling in the fields. And it's not as simple as just swapping the file out. So that's one of the awkward things. It also can't have any kind of dynamic repeating tables. So if you have any kind of table of information, you would have to just add as many rows as you think you might need and add a bunch of separate fields for each. So it isn't going to be a smooth experience for any kind of relational database or repeating tables, because it's just static. All right, let's do a demo of templates and web forms. Terry says, could we sign with cell phone by using fingerprint or face recognition? I don't know. That is a good question. I'm not sure. When I clicked the button to sign it with my cell phone, it sent me a text, and it just took me to a web page that I signed on with my finger. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. But I'm also not sure if there's a mobile app for it. I hadn't looked into that. Okay, let me go back to the home page, and I'm going to start with, so think about, again, long legal agreements that you have for your company. So like this, like a long legal agreement. So I can take this file and I'm going to start with this. Actually, I'm going to start with one that has more fields in it. I'm going to do my statement of work. So I've got this, blah, 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 statement of work. And I'm going to put a little more space. It's kind of hard to get those little text boxes in that Adobe interface to fit in here. So I'm going to make these spaces a little bigger. And you'll probably find you'll have to do this at least once when you're kind of playing around with adding fields. Okay, so that is my statement of work. And I'm going to start off by creating a reusable template. And I take my statement of work and just drag it there. And I've already got one in here, so I'm just going to call this demo 2. And this is that reusable form field layer that I was talking about that you can use and apply to another. That's kind of getting a little in the weeds though. So I'm just going to leave it with the default reusable document. And I can even say, if I want anyone in my organization to be able to use this template, I can do that. All right, preview and add fields. And again, everything so far is exactly the same for web forms and templates. The only thing different in this experience is that at the end, when it's a web form, it gives you a URL. So like I have this URL that I was going to show you in a minute. Okay, so it is smart. So it does recognize some fields sometimes. So it's already looked at my document and it sees it's recognizing that there might be some form fields in it. So when I click this button, it actually puts, now that's kind of an awkward place. I didn't really have a form field there. So it's just kind of guessing where I might want to have some form fields. but I can just use my delete button and delete them. See, this is an actual form field. Oh yeah, see, it just added a whole bunch of semi-random ones that I'm just going to delete. It's trying to be helpful. All right, and it takes anything that it finds that it's a hyperlink. There's my company, IW Mentor, and it puts a little hyperlink control on it so that people can click on it in the Adobe, in the sign when they're in there signing it. All right, so I want to use some fields in here. So I take a signature, drag it here, name. So I've got information about the signer. So these are some built-in fields. So if I wanted to have the name of the person, like when they're typing their name, when they're signing it, and I want their name that they type to be displayed on the form, that's what I can use. And there's a built-in company field, and there's also a built-in date, which they can't change that. That's just going to be capture the date right when they're signing it. And then I can have another signer. So I'll just put, this will be my signature. So I send a statement of work out to a customer, and then it goes to me to sign it after that. So this signature is going to be for the second participant. See, it kind of grays it out, color codes them. See, this is participant 1 signature. And let's see, need the name of, now if I didn't change this to say participant 2, this would end up also saying the name of that first person. And then I also need the date that the second person signed it. All right, and then how many hours? Okay, so this is where I can start pre-populating fields. Let me go ahead and show you this workflow in action. So I can see that I've got some fields that I'm putting on here, like for hours, and I need to have number of hours and an hourly rate and a total due. So instead of having the person have to fill those out in the template, I'll show you how I can make my flow fill these in as well, or instead. So what I'm doing is I'm dragging these all onto the screen. So some of them are going to be the built-in signature fields, you know, as far as the built-in functionality, and then some of them I'm just gonna drag text boxes into the spot where I need them. I can even do drop-down boxes, radio buttons, and images. Now each field is going to have a whole bunch of settings, just like in Power Apps and in InfoPath and every form product you use. It's going to help to give these better names. So this one is the number of hours. I'll call it hours. And I can change, you know, give it a default value, tooltip, just all kinds of fancy things I can do with it. I'll call this one rate. And this one will be total. And I can even make them read only. So maybe I want to pre-populate this rate. I can pre-populate all of these and make them read only. And so they're just going to see it and sign it. That's also another option. All right, so you would go through, just picture your long legal agreements, going through them all and placing the fields where they belong. It's very, if you have lots of really long, big forms, this is going to be pretty time-saving compared to having to build an entire set of SharePoint lists and fields and go through all that work of, it's a completely different interface, but for some types of forms, this might be better. Now this one says total hours, but I already have one called hours. Watch this. When I type hours here, it tells me it's being used. So I don't want to give it a different name. Watch this. If I've got one that's already being used, I can take it and I want to clone it. So then when I clone it, that is going to be, that way that exact same number of hours will just be displayed in both places. And it tells me this field has 2 locations. So I can just jump to the other one if I want to. So cloning is what you do if you have, like, if you are showing the company name in multiple places or something like that. So this says prepared for, and I have their company. So I'm going to take this and clone it. Let me make sure I give it a good name. So yeah, let's call it company. And clone field, and then put that up at the very top. All right, and then save. Okay, now is a good time to go ahead and do the demo of showing you how this is all going to tie in. And then I'll get to the slides and show you kind of how some of this works. Okay, I'm going to take this, take a project here. I've got a list of SharePoint customers. I'll just give you a little bit of a high-level overview. This is all just test data. I've got a list of customers, and I've got a customer email address, and I've got an internal liaison, which is the person in my company, maybe that kind of is works with our company and that customer, and they're kind of in the know about everything that's going on with them if you have a big company. And then I have for each customer might have multiple projects. So then I have a projects list in SharePoint, and the projects list has a lookup field to the customer. And again, each customer could have multiple projects. All right, so I can pick a project and send a statement of work for that project. So this one is going to be Contoso intranet build. So I'll go ahead and run my flow, send the customer the statement of work. Okay, run flow. It's not asking me for anything, but it is going to go over to that customer, and the flow is going to look at what that customer's email address is and send that person an email for the signature. Okay, so I had closed my email. Let me open it back up. If you send a Word document versus a PDF, would the signer have the ability to edit because it's a Word document? Nope, everything looks like a PDF. So it doesn't, if you dragged a Word document versus a PDF into that first screen, you have the exact same experience, and no one is ever going to be able to edit these files except for whatever fields you drop on that interface. Okay, let's see. Now in my flow, I have an email that it's sending the new customer, letting them know that they're about to receive an email from Adobe Sign, basically, and what the total cost is going to be, and that we're looking forward to having them as a customer, yada, yada. And then they get the official Adobe eSign email to go sign that file. So this is, let's see, come on, Adobe. Oh, that one's taking a second. There we go. Okay, so now this is what the customer would see. And it's already got Contoso in here because now I did not set this to read only because I thought maybe a company might want to change the name and put LTD on the end or whatever their official name is. And then I've got click here to sign. So this is where Bob customer would write their name to sign it, and see it puts the printed name here and it puts their signature here. And it also, since I had two places where the company was, it put it in both places. It pre-populated. See, I made it read only. This is not the same exact template as the one I just showed you. This is one I pre-created before we started. And then it also has the number of hours, $20 an hour rate for 2000. So, and they sign it, and then it'll say click to sign at the bottom. And then I put in my flow, I put a second signature in here. So this would be where you'd have maybe somebody at your company, like your CEO, like me, who is the one that has to officially sign all these files. So I'm going to be getting an email about that one too. Let's see. And this could go to a shared email address as well if you wanted to. All right. Not sure if I want to sit here and wait for that. Okay, close that. And then did I receive that one? 11:15. I've been running this over and over again. I'm not sure if it's slow because of the Teams thing or if it's just not showing up.
Laura, while you're waiting for that,
Yeah.
we do have a question that we've kind of missed in the Q&A from Jerry about creating a policy management SharePoint system.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Policy management SharePoint system that requires signatures. So, yeah, a signature cover page concept. So, are you talking about? Oh, yeah. So you could create one file, like upload one template and this generic one. And then when you using Flow, when you send out the agreement for people to sign, you can pick multiple templates. So like this one customer of mine, every customer needed to get this document and then this final signature page. And if they were a certain type of customer, they got this other document. So they're really getting 3 documents when Flow was sending it to them, but it mashes them all together into one thing. So you could have like a generic cover page that could always be added. It just depends on how if you're going to trigger it from a flow or what you're going to do with that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to the end result here. So what I set my flow to do was after the thing gets signed, it's going to take that agreement and I just put it as an attachment. So this is the one that I ran like right before I started this demo. It just goes to that project in SharePoint and just takes that thing that everyone just signed and puts it as a SharePoint list item attachment. Now for my customer that I did this for, they wanted it in a library. So I created a library for all the agreements, and then I had the flow create a folder for each customer. So then it would drop all those associated files just in that customer's folder. It's up to you as to which one you'd want to do that in Flow. Okay, so now a demo of a web template. Let me go grab that URL. So I'm going to take this and just go into like an anonymous, start over with a completely new browser session. So I'm an anonymous user now, and I'm going to go to this web form. Web forms, again, are created the exact same way templates are. So I uploaded this generic client intake form just so you could see what a web form looks like. So then, I don't know how much time I want to spend filling this out. I'll put my email address. And that can be external, anyone at all. And then tester, and click to sign. So I would be, if these are required, then I have to fill them out. But you could see that I've created sort of different types of fields in here. And it's got that big, ugly demo only thing across the middle. All right, so this is the thing I was telling you about that is part of all web forms. It's going to always verify. So some of you might consider that to be a good thing or not. You might think that's annoying that people would have to get that, but it says, please confirm your signature on client intake form. So then all they have to do is click this button, and then it's just basically like, thanks, we got it, that's it. And then this one, I already verified it. So that is what a web form looks like. That's the experience, is that someone could just start from a URL as opposed to having to start from having a template sent to them. Does that make sense? So it's where you could just have a URL as a button on a SharePoint page or just something you send to your customers to fill out. Okay, and then that also goes into that web interface. Let me see which screen I'm in. When I go to manage things in here, I'm always going to have web forms and templates. So these are 2 forms these are the ones that I'm managing, that I'm working on. And then things that people have filled out and finished, like this is that web form. I can always go open it or download it. And this thing has reports and just a ton of stuff you can do. All right, I'll go back to my slides. Did I miss any? I think I got all the questions so far. Okay, cool. And I've got about, what, 20 more minutes, I think. Okay, so we went over that. Now let's talk about the Adobe Sign flow triggers and actions. Most of what I've shown so far is what Adobe looks like and what it can do. Now, this is where you can start integrating it with other things like SharePoint. There are some triggers and there are some actions. The triggers, the most common trigger that I use is either when the state of an agreement changes or when an agreement workflow is completed successfully. Now, I used to think that the word workflow here meant there's a whole separate thing in an eSign called workflows. There's a whole separate interface and you can create workflows in there. I haven't even tried that. So I thought this word workflow, that's what I thought it was referring to. But what this means is any agreement that's going to multiple people, when it's finished going to all the people that are supposed to be signing it, then that would trigger this flow. As opposed to when the state of an agreement changes means that anytime anyone signs it at all. So it could be the first signer, second signer, third signer, every single person that signs it is going to trigger the flow. You have a ton of actions in here too as well. So I'll go ahead and kind of talk a little bit more about, I'm not going to have the bandwidth to talk about every single possible action, but we'll talk about some of the most common ones. So here's the example of, I kind of showed you the end result of what that flow was doing for the projects. I'll go ahead and give you a little bit more information about that. I have my customers, I have my projects, both SharePoint lists. I have a statement of work that needs to be sent out to the customer for a project. I trigger the flow from the project in the project list. Just in mine, it's just a manual trigger. And then flow goes out and gets the customer info from that customer list item and gets the project info, and then get that. It's important that the customer email is in there. It needs an email address to send it to, and it sends them the statement of work to be signed. Customer signs it, and then optionally, if you want to have a second signer, like somebody from your company, sign it. But then at the end, the whole thing gets added. I added to the SharePoint list item as an attachment. And then I mentioned you also have a lot of other options of what you want to do with those files. Once they've come back in, you could put it in a document library. You can use Flow to create a folder, put it in a certain folder in a document library. Adobe even gives you the ability, so even if it's considered one attachment and it's one big thing and it's one big file, it has actions in there that you can go iterate through all the separate documents. So if I need to have, like I mentioned, the customer that's getting several agreements and a W-9 all together in one thing, if I need those all split out because I need it to be easier to just go quickly look at their W-9 later, and I just want all those separate files to be in that customer folder, then it has actions for that as well. All right, so here's my first flow. This is the one that I manually trigger in SharePoint for the SharePoint item. And I'm just going to briefly mention this and we'll go dig into it when I demo it. And then it gets the project, gets the customer. I need to have a nice, pretty $sign format. Lets them know that it's coming, and Adobe sends an agreement to them. And then I'm updating a status. So I created a status field on the project item in SharePoint that it's going to change it to something like statement of work sent. And then I'm doing this extra thing. The reason I'm doing this extra thing at the bottom to create a workflow log item, I created a separate SharePoint list called workflow log. And I'm using this for the agreement when it's waiting for the agreement, because there is no action in Adobe to sit and wait for the agreement to be signed. Now, you might not care. It might not matter to you once the agreement's signed. You might not want anything to automatically happen. But if you want something to be triggered once the agreement is signed, like get the PDF, put it in SharePoint, do anything else, then there is not a way to just make this first workflow wait for that to happen. So my method is that I create a SharePoint list called workflow log and just create an item in there with the name of the agreement in it. And the name of the agreement does need to be unique. But that's what it's, because that's what it's going to look for whenever the agreement comes in when it's signed. Okay, so this is the details about that one action that I just showed you for creating an agreement. This is the meat of it. It tells you an agreement name. I'm just using sort of a variable where I mash together the name of my company and the year and the customer name. I put that as my agreement name. And then this is where I pick which template that I want it to send, what type of signature is, like the little roles they have, and then who's receiving it. This is a field from SharePoint, and they're going to be the first signer. But then when you expand the advanced options, there's a ton more stuff. You can add up to 25 recipients. So it's got recipient, email, signing order, and role. It's got 25 of these all down the page when you expand it out. So that's where you can, add more approvers. And then you also have up to 50 form fields. So this is where you can pre-populate those fields in the PDF, like in this case, the hours and the rate. And anything else, like if you want to pre-populate that customer's company name. So I've got company, hours, rate. Now this matches what I showed you in the interface where you're naming the fields. So 6 slides ago, I just want to recap this real quick. See this, where I'm naming the fields. I named this one hours. You just have to make a note of that, like write it down somewhere what you named these, because that's the exact same name that you'll need to use when you are naming them in here, because that needs to match so that it can put that data in that form field for you, in the template for you. All right, let's go look at that workflow. Okay, so that is the first workflow. So this is where I send my customer statement of work. Man, I've got what, like 4 more minutes? Cool. It's not going to be enough. Okay, so I've got my selected item in SharePoint. I'm just putting together a nice pretty title with my company name and the year. I'm going to get that specific project that I just clicked on. I'm going to get the associated customer for that project. I'm going to format. I'm multiplying the hourly rate by the hours planned and to get the total. And I'm multiplying that and I'm putting it in a nice pretty format. Sorry, I have to go a little fast. Then I'm just sending a heads up email to the customer, letting them know about the total cost and that they're going to receive an agreement. This is where I'm putting together my pretty agreement name with the customer. This is the thing that's got my company name and the year, and then like project type, like prepaid. And here is that Adobe action. So here's my agreement name. This is where I can pick. These are all the templates I've created in my Adobe eSign interface. I can pick what type of signature it needs to be. And this is a dynamic person that it's going to. And then you can even customize what the message says when it goes out to them. That message is in the email. It's also at the top of the thing they're signing. And then this one, I hard coded the second recipient and just put a 2 here. And then keep scrolling. And this is where you start getting to all the form fields. So this is where you can type the name of each field and what you want to pre-populate it with. So like name 2, that's going to be, I'm the second signer. So I just typed my name in here. All right, so then it is going to go update that SharePoint list item to say statement of work sent as the status, and it's going to create a workflow log item. I had to add this demo use only thing in front because of the Adobe eSign demo developer account that I'm using. You wouldn't normally have to have that. So the title of the workflow item is going to match the title of my agreement that I just created. So that's when it goes out to the person. And then let me go back to the slides and go to workflow number 2. This is the one when the agreement has finished being signed. After it's completed successfully, the main thing I have to do is go get that log item that matches the name of the agreement that was just signed. So it's going to go look for the name just in that SharePoint list with the log items. And then it's going to say, now technically somebody could have signed something else that's not one of the agreements that's part of my workflow. So I don't want that to trigger or get an error in the flow. So I want it to go look to go find the log items and then count how many that it found that match. But if there aren't any matches, I just want it to say, hey, it doesn't match anything. And so just so I don't get an error. If it does match, I'm going to go get that customer project, get the customer, and then get a PDF of the signed agreement, send the customer just a lovely thank you email. And then I'm doing the SharePoint add attachment action to add it to that SharePoint project, updating status to say it's done, and then I'm deleting that log item that was just waiting for it. And let's go look at that real quick. This is my agreement status. I'm kind of curious if it didn't fail a minute ago. I just probably didn't see it. This one, there's a lot more to it, but the important part is that this name doesn't mean anything. You could type anything here. Any agreement in my group. So basically anything that gets signed is going to trigger this, which is nice because I don't have to have a workflow just sitting and waiting. Adobe is going to trigger my flow. I'm just getting some variables for the IDs of these things and a variable to count. Then I'm going to go get the log item where the title of it equals the agreement name that was just signed. So I have all these fields from Adobe that are being returned about that agreement. See, you can get their IP address and all kinds of stuff. I'm counting using the length to get how many items it returned that matched. Usually it's just going to be one, but if it's none, I just want to do nothing pretty much. But if it is, I'm going to go set the variable for the log ID that matches, go get the project ID that matches that item, and get the file name of that particular agreement. Then I just use to go get item action to go get that project, get that customer, get PDF of a signed agreement. That's what you need to do you'll just have the agreement ID that was passed to it from the trigger. So you need to go get the PDF of that signed agreement. That's important. And no advanced options that I need. This is just a courtesy email. And then I'm taking this attachment. See, I'm taking this file name that I generated in a variable, and then I'm just saying this SharePoint item, this project, I'm just taking the content of this attachment, get PDF of a signed agreement, and I'm just adding that as an attachment to a SharePoint list item, and then I'm just updating the project status, and then delete that original log item that triggered the whole thing. So there are 100 different permutations and different things, ways that you can slice and dice this. One more quick thing that I want to show you, because this is like the coolest thing that I discovered that I was really excited about when I was playing around with all this stuff last night that I had no idea existed, is that you can create, if you have Adobe Sign accounts for everybody, you can create this Adobe Sign integration in SharePoint. Watch this, web form mappings. I can take, when somebody fills in a web form, like this client intake form I just showed you, I can map it to a SharePoint list. So we'll automatically fill in the SharePoint list item for all the stuff they just filled in the web form. That is huge. I think that is really huge because I couldn't figure out, there's not a way to do it via Flow. But if you do the investment of everybody having an Adobe eSign account, you could have web forms just go straight into SharePoint. And that just about wraps it up. We go to my last slides here. And try and take some questions. Does the eSign connector come with the eSign subscription if it's enterprise? Yeah. When you try to use the eSign connector, it will have you authenticate to eSign, and it will tell you if you have the wrong kind of account. I also have, can the fields collected be placed in columns in a SharePoint document library? Jay Lee, yes with a web form. No, not with a template. But with a web form, you'd have to use that web form integration. So I have, this is the link to do the installation instructions for that integration in your SharePoint site. This is how to create one of those free developer accounts. And I have an 8-hour advanced Power Automate course, and I have a bunch of Power Apps and Power Automate and SharePoint courses on my site at IW Mentor. So check that out. And thanks everybody for coming. There was just not enough time. That Adobe stuff is so cool.
Thank you so much, Laura. I can't believe how quickly you wrapped up there. That was awesome. I think we just got one new question come in. Here we go. How can I get the that sign integration with SharePoint?
Yep, it's right here. It's got the. Can you see my screen still?
Yeah.
It's also in my slides. I know I turned them in, so I think they're sharing our slides with everyone, but it's this URL that's on the screen.
Yep, all the sessions will go live on YouTube within a couple of days, and I think they will link out to your slide deck for people to download.
Cool.